Hello, girls, guys, or otherwise. This is Rich, and welcome to our Witchy Book Club series. We are going through the Outer Temple of Witchcraft. If you do not have your copy, go ahead and into the description below. There will be a link for an Amazon. It's an Amazon link. I don't know if I still have an affiliation with Amazon. Can't really rightly remember. But anyway, you can order your copy of the Outer Temple of Witchcraft there. We are going through chapter 1. I am currently at work. I have a little downtime right now, so I figured I'd go ahead and try to sneak in a video. If I can do it in its entirety, it'd be fantastic. If not, light editing and whatnot. My main focus is I want to get as much done before this weekend. I might still have to... Sorry, I have some dust on the keyboard here, and of my iPad, and it's gonna bug me. But I want to try to get as much filming done prior to the weekend, because this is a military weekend, and I kind of like to have that little extra time to sit back and relax and do some research for other things. So yeah, I wanted to go ahead and film this while I have the chance, and tonight, this is Thursday that I'm recording this, so tonight I'm probably going to edit Tuesday's video. Whole bunch of stuff going on in the background, as y'all know. And one thing I do want to say is the computer that we have here does make sounds from time to time, so you might hear some beeping and whatnot in the background. That's just the security computer and all that. So if you hear that, just ignore it. If somebody comes in during my filming, I will obviously cut. Or if somebody calls me on the work phone, I will obviously be cutting that out. All that stuff. So it might be a little choppy here and there, but we're gonna get through it. In the meantime, if you are not yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It should be right about there. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button, because it helps appease the algorithmic gods of YouTube. All hail the algorithmic gods of YouTube. It helps push the video to other people and whatnot. Try to get a community of people in here that want to go through a witchy book club series. Wow, I can barely speak today. Let's have some coffee. Grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your beverage, whatever it may be. Sit on back, relax, and we're going to go through, again, Chapter 1 of the Outer Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Penczak. I do not think there is a 20th edition to this book. That's probably going to come within the next year, I would assume, that there's an updated version. The copy that I am reading from is a first edition 5th printing, done in 2008. The original that it came out with was in 2004. Yeah, this was originally released in 2004. So we got a couple years before 20th. But anyway, the chapter is entitled Sacred Space and Circle. Of course, there is also an introduction. I'm not going to go through the introduction just because, well, time's sake and whatnot, and I didn't have it put on my calendar to do that because, well, who reads introductions? Let me know in the comments below if you read the introductions to books. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I kind of leafed through this one, but if that's something that you want to read, go ahead. Starting at chapter 1, in the grandest of traditions, going through the first sentence or first paragraph that is stated in this chapter. And I got a thing on me. Hold on. There we go. We go through the first sentence, first paragraph of the chapter to see really how he starts off the chapter. Kind of scrutinize just a little bit, in the most loving and respectful way. And he writes, "If you enter the heart of the teachings of witchcraft, At the core, you will find the power of sacred space. I think this is a fantastic way to start off this chapter and this book. Sacred space is, I believe, the underpinning of the entire book, building your sacred space, your physical sacred space, as it is. So I think this was a strong start to this chapter, to this book, and yeah, I kind of like it. I'm there for it. I like sacred spaces and whatnot, whether it's an actual temple, a church, a circle that you are making a sacred space, if that makes sense, in witchcraft and whatnot. You know, making that sacred space, making a designated area as sacred, even if it's only for that portion of time. I love the concept and the execution of sacred space, and the way that we make it sacred I find is fascinating, because everybody does it a little bit differently, and I find it all fascinating. It's quite lovely in its entirety. At the bottom of page 7, for many people, the craft of the witch becomes so focused on spell work or memorizing rituals that even the concept of the greater meanings and mysteries never cross their minds. I must say that this rings very true for me. We have a tendency in the witchy community, in the pagan community, of memorizing things. Even in the Christian community, there is a tradition of memorizing the words to prayers or whatnot without really digging into them. There's the beeping I was telling you about. Without really digging into the meaning behind what is being said. Take, for instance, the Lord's Prayer. You know, many people are going to be familiar with it, but how many people really stop and think, you know, what each line of the Lord's Prayer means? There have been books written on just that one prayer. Heck, there have been books written on the prayer of Jabez, and that is a much shorter prayer. You can write an entire dissertation probably on the Nicene Creed, or the what's the other one? Oh, son of a gun. The Apostles' Creed, also known, I believe it's also known as the Nicene Creed. But anyway, you can write an entire dissertation on what each line of that means. There have been songs written on it. And if you start scrutinizing and knowing the why behind what you're doing, knowing the why behind what you're saying, it is a lot more impactful when you actually say it. So I like that he brings this in, and this is part of what has been part of my practice for a number of years now, with Annie's teaching of the why behind what we do, the seeking out the reason why we do certain things, and the reason why we say certain things, or perform certain rituals in certain ways and whatnot. Knowing that why behind what you do is so much more impactful. Then he goes into perfect love and perfect trust. He says, sacred space is simply honoring the sacredness and divinity found in all things, everywhere. Okay, and I'm going to skip around here a little bit. We acknowledge that this space exists only, or not only in the physical, but also in all worlds, and opens the doorway between worlds to be in conscious communion with the sacredness on all levels of reality. And last one here, I was told to say perfect love and perfect trust, so I did, but it didn't know why and didn't really dwell on it. Okay, again, that last one is the knowing the why behind what you do. It's more impactful whenever you actually start to decipher it. Excuse me. I like how he says the sacred space is simply honoring the sacredness, the divinity found in all things everywhere. Love that sentence. It really goes to the heart of what a sacred space is. It is a way of honoring divinity, the divine, in whatever way you celebrate the divine. The sacred space itself is an honoring of that. And I might actually have to do a video for a Witchy Wednesday on sacred space and casting circle and all that. I did one on the pagan perspective, and I absolutely fell in love and started to be infatuated with the correlations of walking a circle and how that has become a part of multiple practices and whatnot. I find it fascinating, and I think I'm going to have to do a little bit more of an in-depth research and video into that for this channel, even though that one as a standalone is fairly well rounded, and I did quite enjoy that. So that's whenever I first started getting infatuated with sacred space or circle casting specifically. As he says here, acknowledging that the space not only exists in the physical, but opens the doorway between worlds to be in conscious communion with the sacredness on all levels of reality. This is important, that whenever you are in that sacred space, you are not just, you're not just in an office, you're not just in a witchy room, as that is primarily where I do my work, is in my witchy room. You guys have seen it plenty of times. But whenever you're in sacred space, you are not just in that physical location. You are also connected to the divine on other levels. And being in that sacred space and making it a sacred space, even in a moment in time, making that space sacred for that time is also connecting you to other levels of reality and whatnot, and it's quite beautiful, and I love it. I love that he actually put that in here. Moving on to page 10. With unconditional love, you are loved simply because you exist. You are love. Cannot say how much I love that he put this in here. He goes on for like a page or so talking about the perfect love aspect, and I really appreciate that he did this, because it's easy for a lot of us to say, I love this, I love that, and at a certain point it cheapens the word, but and really trying to differentiate your wording, trying to say you appreciate something rather than love, actually brings a little bit more power to the word of love. And I appreciate that he put that in here, that he actually went down that rabbit hole. It is, I think it is fitting. I'm not going to go over all of it, but I think it's fitting that he put that in there, and I think it's well thought out and well executed. Perfect trust is a divine sense of knowing and security with the creative spirit, the goddess and God. Being in that perfect trust, that you know that they're there, knowing that they have you in mind, that they have your back in that space, that you are there with this loving being that has your best interests at heart, might have an agenda of sorts to get you to a certain point. I think it is the root of the perfect love, perfect trust, knowing that they love you unconditionally, that they will tell you when you mess up, but that's out of love because they want you to do better. And the perfect trust of knowing that they have your back there, that you are protected. Perfect trust runs both ways. as we have it through this unconditional love for the divine. We know that the goddess and God have it for us. Love that. Perfect. Would not change it. At the bottom of page 10, excuse me, the challenge we have as those walking the spiritual path of witchcraft is to inject more and more perfect love and perfect trust or sacredness to all thoughts and actions in our life. Bring it to every relationship and exchange. It is quite difficult sometimes, depending on what you do on a daily basis, to make sure that at the heart you still have the spiritual aspect of your of your spiritual path, your spiritual practice, that you are continually going to that spiritual practice, that you are using that as a touchstone, like, you know. And he even says it in here about, I believe it's in here, about an altar, and having that as a physical representation of your spiritual practice, and coming to that altar to constantly have that as a forefront of your mind is your spiritual practice. And I think this is a challenge for a lot of people that are on the go, for a lot of people who constantly have something going on where they can't necessarily go to their spiritual practice every day or multiple times a day. And it is an issue that I have had, that I can still identify with and struggle with, of going to that spiritual point and actually devoting time. But yeah, let's move on to page 11. You can hold a sacred love for someone in your heart and honor that person as a living being, as a spiritual soul, but you can draw a boundary for your own health and well-being. Unconditional love doesn't mean you encourage others to walk all over you and hurt you. This is important. Boundaries are important. Just because you love somebody doesn't mean that they have carte blanche to go ahead and walk all over you. So keep in mind that just because you love somebody doesn't mean that you are beholden to them in their capability to rule over you in one way or another, or make you feel bad about the choices that you make in life. Moving on to page 12. I even had thoughts from my previous years of Catholicism, thinking, oh no, perhaps I was wrong about this witchcraft thing. Perhaps God is mad at me for this, and we are going to hell. This is a common theme, I think, through Christo-pagans especially, that we have this unique spot where we constantly question things in our practice, whether or not biblical truth is there, or whether witchcraft is real, or whether we should, if it is real, whether or not we should actually be practicing it. And that's part of what I'm doing with the Witchcraft in the Bible series on Sundays. So go ahead and join me on that tomorrow, whenever you're seeing this. And I'll be right back. Gotta love those spam callers. Okay, so we're back. And I could have probably taken a drink before, but hey, who knows? We'll never know what might have been. Let's just say. Anyway, now I've lost all train of thoughts. But I think that this idea of, maybe we're going to hell because we're doing magic and whatnot, or because we are witchy individuals, that we are going to hell. And like I said, I've been going through the Witchcraft in the Bible series, identifying the individual verses and whatnot that are used in expressing that witches should not be or are not following the rules of God. Excuse me, I had lunch and it's a little gassy, just saying. If you've made it this far, you're probably, a regular viewer. You know what happens? You know what happens after you eat? Anyway, I had tacos today. So, leftover tacos, just saying. Anyway, I think that is a common thing that we, especially as Christo-pagans, deal with a lot is, maybe we're going to hell. Again, I'm addressing those on Sundays. Whenever you're seeing this, tune in tomorrow for that. Then I wanted to review on chapter 12 this paragraph here. The key to fully integrate into the sacred space and be open to the most magical of experiences is the ability to clear the mind, enter an altered state, and tune into the sacred energies within you and the circle. To bring balance and harmony, some people can do it naturally without any training, but the best way I found to teach it to others is to learn the discipline of meditation. This is important. Meditation is a huge part of, at least has been a huge part of my practice. Sitting there even by yourself in contemplation of, and not even really going anywhere, not even necessarily going to your inner temple, your sacred space inside of you, but just slowing down the mind and focusing on, okay, this is happening right now, let's address that, and then moving on to the next thing. It slows your mind down, and it puts you in that aspect of just focusing on one thing at a time, and it's actually quite beneficial. He then goes on to talk about altered states. To work magic and meditation, you must be able to enter an altered state, often called gnosis. Okay, this is not the same definition of gnosis that I have found, and that is practiced by the Gnostics. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear whenever we are talking about Gnostic teachings versus this gnosis that he's talking about is different. He does give an exercise here. I believe these are pretty much straight from the Inner Temple. So a nice little callback there. On page 17, bringing sacred space into your life, a universal technique found in so many cultures and spiritual paths is altar building. I love a good altar. Before I go on that, yes, I love a good altar, and I love creating an altar. I love just, the experience of setting something on there is even powerful, because everything, whenever I set them on there, everything has a specific reason why it's going in a specific place and what its meaning is to me. So if you look at an altar of mine, I mean, my meditation altar is very specific about what's on the actual altar. And if you look at my my working altar, things are a little bit more haphazardly placed depending on what I'm working on at the time and whatnot. Some things are just for a focus. Some things are actually purposely put there just for like a specific reason. But some of them are just there because I thought they looked nice there. And aesthetics is, a thing with me whenever I'm, setting up an altar and whatnot as well. And there's nothing wrong with, having something that's aesthetically pleasing. It is purely, at that point, preference. I'm going to put my feet up here a little bit. He goes on to say, I've had a lot of people complain that you don't need an altar, that it is stupid or archaic, and as modern witches, we don't need to use tools of the past. I don't entirely disagree. and like he says, I understand the sentiment that you don't always need all the tools, all the things, and it is good to note that. Somebody just pulled in here, so I'm gonna have to pause again. I'll be right back. Okay, so now that we finished with a potential customer, let's go back into here. Okay, so yeah, whenever we're talking about whether or not you need an altar, I don't disagree with people that have said this to them. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's archaic. I think that an altar is a fantastic way to have a focal point of your intention, what you're putting out there, and constantly coming to that. Or even if you don't come to it every day, at least you have a visual representation. So I do find having an altar as a good thing, but I can also see people's point of view whenever they say, it's a little archaic, it's a little silly, this and that. And you don't need everything that's there. You don't have to have everything there. Going down a little bit, he says, I don't know of any other technique that is as simple yet profoundly powerful to remind the aspiring practitioner of sacred space every day. And I do agree with him on this. I think even though you don't have to have it, I think that if you do have it, if that is something that you choose, I think that it is a powerful and fairly simple way of having this focal point to your sacred space, to the way that you do your witchiness. Moving down a little bit, by making space for it in your home, you are symbolically making space for the life of a witch in your life. And I can agree with that. Making a space for something new by designating a spot for it in your life, totally agree. That is kind of opening yourself up to that. Moving on to page 18, I have a lot of things underlined here, and just so you guys know, this is how I do it. I underline or bracket things, and sometimes I'll write a little note in there. Usually I am a book purist, but in doing the Outer Temple of Witchcraft, there's just no way I can handwrite every single thing that I have to say. Let's see. To start, create an altar in your home where you can do meditative and ritual work. Ideally, you want to have an altar you can keep out and see often, but some of us don't have that luxury. I know witches who hide their altar in an empty closet, or have designed it in such a way that it closes so no one else can see it. One clever witch used an empty Victrola box, which many people out there probably don't know what a Victrola box is, but I think that's clever. An empty Victrola box she could use when company came over. Others have to dismantle and reassemble the altar when any magical work is done. Do what is best for your situation. There is so many ways to do an altar. And one way that I did mine whenever I was in Florida is I had a little multi-tiered shelf, and I believe I've shared that on this channel. But on the shelf, I could have my wand on there, I could have my athame on there, all that stuff. And it was all in its own little spot on this wall in my kitchen. And if somebody were to come over, like whenever my mother came to visit, I just took the wand down, took the athame down, and everything else on there, like, the bell or the incense holder or any of the rocks or anything like that, they just looked like a nice little display. And it didn't cause any controversy. It didn't really raise any questions or anything. It looked like an aesthetically pleasing display. So there are definitely ways to do it, and that's one way that I found that worked for me in that situation. Now that I'm back up in New Jersey and have my own individual room, I can actually, you know, kind of sprawl out and do anything that I want in there. And if somebody were to come over and I don't want them going in there, I can lock the door. Moving on, traditionally altars are supposed to face the north or east. This also depends on where you live in the world, but I'll get to that. Use what your intuition calls you to do. Wow, I can't talk. And what your space allows. Okay, for instance, my meditation altar in the witchy room faces the northeast because that's how my house is laid out. Whenever I had the witchy room upstairs, that is now my boyfriend's little man cave. Whenever I had that room, I could have little like TV trays in each of the coordinate directions, and each one of them had a tablecloth on it, so you didn't really notice it was a TV tray, but they were, and it worked. But I could put them in each individual corner and then just have the main altar in the center, again kind of facing the northeast. But I would prefer an altar facing the east, and those are more in line with how I believe everything starts from the east, like the sun rises from the east, all that stuff. We'll get into that here in a minute. Oh, excuse me. And I'm not editing any of that out. For now, for now, simply place a candle on the altar and on the altar, any color you desire. You can place an altar cloth beneath it. Fairly simple altar. If you have gathered any power objects, but are unsure as to their properties and qualities, such as feathers, stones, incense, crystals, shells, and the like, feel free to add them to the embryonic altar. I love that he said embryonic altar, because this is something that's going to grow out of just the candle and altar cloth. But I love the term embryonic altar. I think that is a fantastic turn of phrase there. Can we seriously make that a thing? Hashtag embryonic altar. Anyway, moving on. On page 19, although you can draw this circle of light, he's talking about circle casting a circle of light. Although you can draw this circle of light around you at any time for any reason, in modern witchcraft there is an emphasis on starting in either in the north or the east. And he does go into reasons why the north or why the east. And I don't think I really underlined anything to go along with that. So I do want to talk about that now. Okay. In Masonic tradition, everything comes from the east, as far as any of your orders or anything like that. Anything that is happening initiates at the east. And the symbolism behind that is where the sun rises to rule and govern over the day, and it travels that path and whatnot, and that's the way you actually walk in a Masonic temple and whatnot. And that has always rung true for me, and it's also made sense in witchcraft, is that everything starts in the east because that's where the sun comes up, and that's how our days are numbered and whatnot. Which way, and we're going to go into that part here soon, which way you also walk the circle is designated by the sun, and that has different significance for me as well, or it has significance for me for that as well as through the Masonic temple and whatnot. So I totally agree with this. Have no notes except that if you are in the southern hemisphere, you may start with if you're traditionally a northern person, uh, like you have your altar facing the north, all that stuff, then maybe you will start in the south instead, because everything is like flipped there. I know some Aussie witches, you know, but there's only two. Ongoing joke from the pagan perspective. If you get that, free points to you. But I know a couple Aussie witches that they're like, yeah, we go in counterclockwise rather than clockwise, and we, instead of having something in the north, we have something in the south. Instead of having something in the east, we have something in the west, or facing, basically everything is switched. So, yeah, I do believe. I think it's east and south, I think. Now I'm going to have to think about that. I'm going to have to think about that some more. But definitely take note of where the sun comes up, where the sun goes down, all that good stuff. And keep that in mind whenever you're in certain parts. Oh, jeez. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Keep that in mind whenever you are in certain areas of the world and whatnot as well. So he goes on to say here on page 22, which is pretty much almost, closing out the chapter. We're going to close here in a minute. The circle is drawn clockwise, which is called diasul, which is pretty common knowledge to most of the witchy people that are probably watching this. Clockwise is the direction of the sun and symbolizes the creation of life and the growth process. Love this. The circle is released counterclockwise, also called widdershins. Moving against the movement of the sun is to release and decrease. Again, agree with this. However, if you are in the southern hemisphere, your mileage may vary. When creating circles of light, they can take on a variety of effects. And this is... Hold on, I have somebody else that just pulled up. Son of a gun. Okay, and we're back, and hopefully that's the last interruption that we get. But where were we? Oh, a variety of effects. Your mileage may vary on how a circle of light works for you. Whenever I have mine going, if I go around with a wand and physically go to each station and whatnot, and I physically walk around the circle, it is more like just a line of demarcation around the entire space. If I do what I usually like to do is do an energy ball and I send it around, and it ends up being more like an atom. Like you have this one, ball of energy that's like an electron, and it just, shoots all around you, but it creates a sphere. And that's how I usually experience my boundary of circle, is whenever I send that ball of energy out and it goes and it zooms around and whatnot. So it's more like a sphere at that point, or like I'm inside of an atom. Your experience may vary, and you may have it varying depending on how you cast a circle too. If you are one that will walk the circle, and you, let's say that you're like me, you're a knitter or a sewer of sorts, and sometimes a crocheter. Whenever you go around there, you might knit together a boundary and have it just kind of like knit together and all that around you. That may be your experience there. if you are somebody who is into Western, um, like like cowboying and whatnot, or cowgirling, or if you're a cowpoke, let's put it that way, maybe you end up having a lariat and it goes around you and it circles around you that way. That may be what you envision. You may envision a wall of fire, or a wall of water, or just a wall of just energy. It can be Matrix style and it's all around you and whatnot. Your mileage may vary and definitely be one of those things. It could be. And if that works for you, fan-freaking-tastic. If it doesn't, and you need to envision it some other way, try a different method. Maybe something that you are saying, maybe say it differently, or with a different wording, and maybe it'll work better for you. But I found a way that works fairly well for me, and I do enjoy it. So anyway, that's all that I have for this, the first chapter of the Outer Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Benzak. Do join me next week for chapter 2. There are no assignments on this one, and no assignments for next week. Let's see. Yeah, chapter 3, we get our first assignments. So do join me for those, and join me on tomorrow for the Witchcraft Through the Bible series, as I'm going through all of these verses that I can find that have anything to do with witchcraft, and that people have as an argument against witchcraft and whatnot. So join me for that one. Join me on Tarot Talk Tuesday, where this coming Tuesday I will be reviewing and revealing a deck. So definitely join me for that, and for Witchy Wednesday, where we're going through the third eye, and then Table Talk Thursday, where we pick from our Table Topics Cube. Again, if you do not have the Outer Temple of Witchcraft, in order to follow along, and that's something that you want to do, you can go ahead and click on the link below. I do stress to probably get it from an independent bookstore or independent witchy shop or whatnot, rather than buying it from Amazon. But if that is something that you need to do, there is a link available for you. So that's all that I have for today. Until tomorrow, may you have love, hugs, and ladybugs. Bye-bye.